Welcome, everyone. Those stories shortly, but first out of Germany, where polling has now started in an election that could see Angela Merkel's return to power for the fourth consecutive term. Experts say it is difficult for her rival, Martin Schulz, from the Social Democrats Party to shake her advantages. Meanwhile, Chancellor Angela Merkel cast her vote in Berlin. According to the latest polling, Merkel's Christian Democratic Union has now secured 37% of support, putting them 17 points ahead of the Social Democratic Party. Merkel has led the German government since taking office in 2005, and residents of the party are now dealing with both Merkel and Schulz. They say they are relatively satisfied with Merkel's achievements in the last 12 years. Merkel met with the campaigners and thanked them for their support before the polls opened. She also reiterated the importance of a peaceful Europe, saying it was worth working towards the goal collectively.
Und ich möchte Ihnen einfach ein ganz herzliches Dankeschön sagen für alles, was Sie schon gemacht haben, aber auch für heute nochmal wirklich haben wir versucht, Ihnen mit Kaffee und Brötchen ein bisschen Power noch zu geben, damit wir heute noch viele Menschen ansprechen. Viele sind noch unentschlossen.
Well, meanwhile, speaking at his last campaign rally before the general election, Schulz vowed to fight for victory until the very last minute.
Mir hat auf dem Weg durch die Gasse einer gesagt, morgen werden sich viele überrascht die Augen reiben. Das glaube ich auch, wenn ich diesen Platz sehe. Wir kämpfen bis zur letzten Minute darum, dass wir dieses Land besser machen.
All right, let's now go straight to WION's senior foreign editor, Padma Rao, joining us on the very latest when it comes to the German elections. Padma, great to have you again. Thanks for joining us. Let's get right to it. Merkel certainly have an advantage, but what about Schulz? How different are these candidates in really appeasing to voters?
I think your question was how different the candidates are, Arjit. Well, Chancellor Merkel is, she has cleverly taken over the centrist position that was occupied by her coalition partner, the SPD, for very many years. And that has left the SPD, her erstwhile coalition partner, her current coalition partner, till the elections are over, a little disgruntled because they find themselves without a very clear-cut agenda. So the SPD would be far happier to sit in the opposition and not come back in the same grand coalition with Chancellor Merkel. And also Chancellor Merkel's CDU-CSU, the union as you call it, might also be looking for a new coalition partner in the FDP, the Free Democrats, the Free Liberals, who were unceremoniously shunted out from Parliament at the last election because they did not make the 5% minimum hurdle it requires to get into Parliament. Now they are, coming back, they're rejuvenated, they've got a whole fresh new campaign. It wears a very young look. Their leader, Christian Lindner, is 38 years old. He's, he is the young face of the FDP. So they've completely reinvented themselves. They're almost certain. In fact, they are going to get into Parliament. It just remains to be seen with what kind of a percentage.
Right.
But the real surprise and the real difference at these elections is going to be the emergence of the so-called right-wing Alternative für Deutschland, AfD. Among its supporters, there are, indeed many sort of, especially in the far eastern part of Germany, skinheads and, rough and tough elements, and there have been incidents of rising violence against foreigners in the east. Having said that, the party itself, in an exclusive interview, in fact, a world exclusive, Arjit, as you know, to WION,
right.
He spoke to me, Armin Paul Hampel, who is the fraction chief of Lower Saxony, and he said it was very surprising what he said. He said Indians will continue to be welcome here. We don't have any problems against foreigners. We're not a racist party. We're neither left nor right. Those are labels our political opponents are giving us. We are the centrist party. So it will be interesting to see. And some people are now saying that this party may even emerge as the second largest party in the Bundestag. So one thing is for sure, you will see a coalition with Chancellor Angela Merkel heading it. Whether she chooses chooses to, whether, we see the emergence of the same existing coalition again, or whether there will be a new one forged between the CDU and the FDP, that seems to be pretty much the only question left.
All right, Padma, let me also ask you as a follow-up, what about the India impact to this, if any, depending on the candidate, depending if it's Merkel or Schulz? I mean, what are the impacts here to the South Asian region, if any, at this point, that you think could likely play a role?
I think you were referring to India and how this is likely to impact India.
Right, correct.
Well, that's, it's a very good question. Nothing is really likely to impact bilateral relations between Germany and India very much. It's really a very small difference, whether the FDP comes in with the CDU or the SPD continues with the CDU, because India and Germany's relationship is primarily a relationship in fields like engineering, in fields like the sciences. There the cooperation is deep and long. It's been, around, in fact, the Germans helped founded and built the earliest and the first IIT in Chennai. So that is an old and long, deep relationship. As far as the so-called strategic relationship is concerned, Archit, yes, there is one since the early 2000s, but that hasn't really flowered or flourished much over the second half of the UPA coalition during that tenure, because things, sort of froze and the bilateral relationship took a back seat. Now there is a new and dynamic team at the German embassy, a new and dynamic ambassador in the German embassy in India, and the Germans, I think their policy towards India will pretty much remain the same, irrespective of which coalition comes to power.
All right, Padma, stand by for a second. We're going to continue chatting with you about all things Germany. But meanwhile, the poll booth manners certainly come into play as well. And who could be more rigorous than the impeccably correct country of Germany? Well, election officials are undecided about allowing small kids into the poll booths. But unlike in other parts of the country, you can take your cell phone with you. But if you think you can take a selfie and post it on social media, well, forget it. Your vote will then be canceled. In fact, there is a harsher punishment for other violators as well. And don't even think about taking a picture of your voting slip and letting the world know. They may see how you voted, but you won't. Well, from your prison cell where you may land for up to 2 years. The world has for long poked fun at, in fact, the Germans for the many complicated elements of their lives, their language, their literature, their worldview. But now, going by that measure, here's another one, the country's electoral system. Padma Rao explains on what exactly the Germany's general election is going to encompass.
It's a big Sunday in Germany. What's happening? Election of Germany's 19th Bundestag, or its parliament. And when? The polling booths are going to be open from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. on Sunday, the 24th of September. And how many voters? Well, the eligible voters total about 61.5 million, and that's down by 400,000 since 2013. And how many seats? There's a total of 598 seats, 299 earmarked for the districts and the rest for political parties. And why do the Germans have 2 votes each? The first vote is to choose a district candidate. The second is to choose a political party. And must the 2 votes go to the same party? No. And what does it take to make it to German parliament? The parties must win at least 3 district votes, known as the first vote, or at least 5% of the overall second vote. And what happens next? 299 candidates with the maximum district votes will enter parliament directly, while parties will receive seats proportionate to their win percentage. For example, if a party wins 50% of the total number of votes cast, then it gets 50% of 299 seats. And what's an overhang? If a party wins 110 district seats and 100 proportionate victory seats, as an example, it gets a total of 110 seats. But what about the others? Other parties get levelling seats. In this case, each an additional 10% of their victory percentage. And what's unique? That the German parliament can be larger or smaller than 598 seats given the overhang and the levelling. Padma Rao, WION.
All right, let's go back to our senior foreign editor, Padma Rao, joining us with the very latest on this. Padma, no matter who wins, whoever ends up becoming the next chancellor, certainly a daunting task ahead, at least for the next 4 years when it comes to dealing with North Korea, dealing with Brexit, and of course, terrorism.
Absolutely, and also dealing with the question of whether to remain within the European Union. How popular is the European Union still as an entity within Germany? Currently, it seems to be on the side of Chancellor Angela Merkel, who is a Eurocentric politician. She wants the European Union to continue. Having said that, there are parties like the AfD, which, as I said, the so-called right-wing party, which is slated to really make history by entering German parliament for the first time since World War II, that is 70 years. So if they get in and they get in with a substantial vote and they sit in the opposition, then it may not be a cakewalk for very Eurocentric policies, because the AfD was certainly against being in the Union, in the European Union. The AfD has said a lot of other things like sealing the EU borders. It's changed its position several times on the European Union. So we might expect to see some fireworks in Parliament over that question. So yes, there are a lot of in fact, even the Paris climate deal, which the United States pulled out of, and Germany only swore to stick by even more, fervently. Now that has found support amongst Europe's leading nation as far as ecology and environment protection is concerned. And that I suspect will remain the case, irrespective of who comes to power. So there are certain issues there. The North Korea issue itself, well, I'd just like to say that it's really an issue that is too far away, except in geographical terms, except that the German government has taken a very firm stance. The foreign minister, Sigmar Gabriel, indeed remarked recently how worried he was about President Trump's policies on both Iran as well as the rhetoric coming out of Washington, D.C. on North Korea, and that emerging from Pyongyang too. But so far, Germany has not taken any very decisive steps or proactive strategic steps in the region, in the South China Seas, in the Asia-Pacific region itself. And it's likely to remain that way. I think we're not going to see too many immediate changes, but what is certainly going to kick up quite a bit of dust is the entrance of the AfD into the parliament for the first time.